everyone knows. And let me go back and share my screen one more time so that you can see that and not everything else on my screen. So that's a little bit about the PLC process. And those questions are key in meetings that we have as a district, as teams, in our grade levels and in our content area as well. And as we went through this process, we have this foundational belief that all students can and do learn under the right circumstances. And another belief that we have, or an action, I guess, item that we have, is that we need to consistently measure the impact of our teaching on learning. So thinking about that, the question came up about how are we reporting learning to our parents and even to our students. And so we looked at the traditional grading system, and the traditional grading system often focuses on a list of assignments, tests, quizzes, extra credit, whatever. There's a lot of different things. It does not focus on the standards or skills that a student needs to know. Even as a parent, in the classroom 15, 18 years ago, I often wondered what my students actually knew and what they didn't, because they didn't report those skills. And so it was something that I, as a teacher, wanted to make sure that I did, to really make sure that I reported to my parents and students what they were learning standard by standard. This focus leads students to chase points, not the acquisition of skills and competencies when we're just listing assignments. And so we really talked as a team and with a group of teachers. We wanted a system that reported learning by standard, and one that helped teachers and teams move away from grading on just a list of assignments, but look for evidence of learning on skills and learning targets. This focus leads students to shift their conversation as well with their teachers, and even maybe with their parents. And instead of saying, what assignments do I need to make up? Or how many points do I need to earn to get a B? The questions can change to, what do I need to do to show that I understand that skill or that concept? It shifts the conversation to learning rather than point chasing. So we looked at the traditional grading scale, and we've done a lot of research with a lot of different researchers on the subject. And and this is pretty basic right here. This is a traditional grading scale of 0 to 100, 90 to 100 A. And if you look at the 100% pie over here, you'll see that that's 10% of that. 80 to 90 is a B, which is 10%. 70 to 79 is a C. You can see all that. But the F range, 0 to 59 or 60, you can see how disproportionate that is. And over half of our grading scale is an F. And if we assume a C grade signifies minimum attainment of course standards, then over 2/3 of our grading scale describes insufficient performance. And only 1/5 of that scale describes academic success, an A or a B. So at its most basic level, we're sending students an anxiety-producing message. The chances are much greater that you'll fail than you'll actually succeed. And in my opinion, that's not fair. What's more, the 0 to 100-point scale makes success less likely, if not impossible, for students who struggle. So let me just throw out a student scenario really quickly. We'll call this student A. Let's say student A earned 85% on assignment 1, 85% on assignment 2, 85% on assignment 3, and then on assignment 4, they failed or got a 0 or didn't turn it in. What would that student's grade be on the traditional 0 to 100 scale? It would be 63% or a D. That system means one missed assignment is a 22% decrease or 2 grade levels. So let's say that student tried to make it up. So there's first, second, third assignment there. And then on the 4th assignment, still have that 0, but they really tried hard to get the next 2 assignments back in, and an 85% on both of those. On the traditional grading system, that student now basically only goes up to a C-. And so we find that once that 1 0 seems to affect the student in such a drastic way that it's so hard to climb back up. And we wondered, is that fair? When we use a scale that's weighted toward failure, it puts tremendous pressure on our students. 1 0 or even a score below 40%, and the student is in a hole that requires outside success to dig out. So here's just some student comments. I didn't do well on the test. It dropped my grade so bad. I was stressed out. I was infuriated. I've been fighting these past few weeks just to try to get it up. If it drops, it's difficult to climb back up the ladder. And then it's hard to bring your grade up. It's easy to bring it down. We didn't want a system like that. We're in it for kids. We want all kids to be able to learn. And so that's where we looked at other scenarios. So you might notice in our current system, it's a 1 to 4 or an A through F scale. I've got the scale over there on the right. And let's go through this same student. Let's say student A got on the learning target, received a B, on the second learning target a B, and on the third learning target a B, and again, on the fourth learning target, that F. What would that student's grade look like on a 1 to 4 scale, or in our current Power School system? It would be a C+. That's only one missed assignment decreases them less than one grade level. And let's say they do what they did before. They've got those first 4 assignments, and they make up the next 2, getting a B on both of those. Then the student climbs back up to a B-, which seems fair. The 0 is not so weighted toward having that student just climb down in that learning pit. So just a brief part of our journey on here. Last year, we had some of our schools do a Mastery Connect pilot, and this was mainly secondary. Some of our elementary schools did as well. And then that really focused on the 0 to the 1 to 4 scale. And then some of our teachers might have had an issue with that. They liked it. There were a lot of things that they wanted to do. And so we brought together a design team. And the current Power School setup that we have now is the result of that design team of, I don't know how many teachers were there, 50 teachers, and administrators were involved in that as well. And what you see now is kind of a result of that design team. They also developed 10 critical components for standards-based grading and a professional development and communication strategy. So all of those are on our district website. If we have some time today, we'll cover those. But know that those were part of our design team, and that the design team is still critical to this, our standards-based grading, and we may pull them again in the near future and work through some of the things that maybe they're struggling on. So our goals here, I guess overall, there might be others. I just kind of put these together. Was to, first of all, it's always to improve teaching and learning for every student. We need to be measuring the impact of our teaching on learning, and not just, I call it feeding chickens. We can't just throw that information out there and expect our kids to learn it. We need to be measuring that impact and make sure they're learning. We want to report learning by standard at the skill level. And we want to provide an equitable system in which all students can and do succeed. So that's kind of a good overview. If we have a few minutes, we'll maybe dive into some of the 10 critical components. I guess the last thing I want to do is maybe talk a little bit about Iron County's profile of a graduate. I don't know if that's something, Corey, you want to talk about for just a second, about how we got that and how that fits into the grade, and then we'll turn it over to questions.
So the Iron County Essential 8, which is our profile of a graduate, came from basically us taking out to our community, parents in particular, but also business, community leaders, and others in our education space, including our post-secondary educators and our students, and asked what are the essential skills students need to be successful in their future. And these are the 8 top skills that our community has indicated are going to be essential for student success. So we want to now, as we've known that these skills have been important for many years, make a more targeted effort to teach, assess, and report on how our students are doing in these skill sets. And so that becomes also a part of how we report students' progress in their coursework, as well as in their Essential 8 skills. So that's something you may notice that we've been doing now for the last couple of years, the last 2 years, with our standards-based pilots. So there are some questions right now. I don't know. So there was one question in the Q&A that Kyle Johnson was going to address.
And Michelle Jorgensen put in the question that said some of the biggest complaints is that a child is proficient in a skill, but they're at a 3. A 3 is a B, so they would have to be above proficient in order to receive an A grade. One of the things, if you look at the standards-based grading literature, you're going to see a lot of vocabulary terms that are kind of unfamiliar to people that are not involved in the education process. So you're going to see things like mastery and proficient and high mastery and above proficient and things like that. We really tried to clarify the terminology, and we've defined a 4 as A-level work. So if a student gets a 4, they met the standard at the level that we would consider an A. A 3 is not defined as proficient or mastery, or because those words are loaded with connotations. The 3 is just simply defined as B level work. A 2 is C level work. 1 is D level work. So we've tried to remove some of those terms like proficient and mastery and above mastery and high mastery, and just those generic kind of subjective terms, and just define it in terms of the letter grade. So if a student is receiving a 3, that means they are performing at the B level based on those teachers' proficiency scales.
So Kyle, maybe give an example in whatever subject you'd like of what might be a B level proficiency and what might be A level proficiency. And I'll leave, I don't know, is that putting you on the spot too much? Kyle, did you hear me? Or Jeanette or anyone? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you now, but I couldn't hear before, so you might have to ask again.
Oh, okay. Whether it's Kyle or Jeanette or Corey, I just wanted to maybe give a little, clarify a little bit that answer. Could you give us an example of, in whatever subject you'd like, science or English or something else, what would be an example of proficiency that would meet a B and maybe what an A might look like? Just for example, it doesn't have to be exactly what we do or what a teacher does, but just maybe to help those that are viewing get a better sense of what the difference is. Corey, I saw your mouth moving, but I didn't hear you.
Sorry, he has an example on Kyle's screen, but we're trying to figure out how to share that. So he'll talk us through, and then I'll try to get it on my screen.
Okay.
Okay, so in a physics standard, I have an example here from one of the teachers in the district. They have a standard on energy, and their specific learning target in that, what they're actually measuring is on energy transfer. So what they have done is at the C level, they've identified 3 critical skills that a student would have to pass off in order to be proficient at the C level. So they would have to be able to identify the types of energy, including all the types of potential energy, identify what types of energy an object has at different positions within a system, describe thermal energy at the molecular level. So you'll notice that C level is kind of basic, foundational, fundamental, key vocab, key ideas. Then at the A level, now they have them describing energy systems, including all the components of the system and their relative energies. Model using a series of diagrams that transfer thermal energy from a heat source through 2 materials that are in contact. So you'll notice there at the A level, we're getting into higher level things. They're modeling energy transfer. They're defining and describing systems, including all of the components of that system with its energy. And then their B criteria is that they've mastered all of the C skills, they've attempted all of the A, and mastered some of the A, but not all. So that's kind of the idea of that proficiency scale. The teacher should be clearly defining to the students the specific skills that are required to achieve a C or a passing grade, and then the specific skills that are required to perform at the A level in that standard. I'll try to send this over to Jeanette and have her show that view if you'd like to see it. But that's kind of the idea of that proficiency scale. So we have the lower level foundational skills at the C level, yeah, I guess that's the best term, the foundational learning or skills that the students need to be proficient. And then the A level would be now the energy information at that standard. So now we're talking about the complexity of the standard.
So now you can share.
Okay.
Can you see the share?
Well, I don't have share. It's going to make me kick out before I can allow that, because it should be allowing. Like I've got Cisco WebEx events, it's allowed, but it still doesn't give me that option to share.
As soon as we make Jeanette a presenter, she can share. So
Yeah.
You go to the top.
No,
Kicks you out.
it's about my system preferences now.
College applications. Yeah, it's not.
So there was another question while we're figuring out how to share. I think there's been some question on, does this change the type of GPA? Do we still use a 4.0 GPA? And how does that impact getting into universities or being considered for scholarships? And I can answer a portion of this, but in terms of how it relates to colleges. But anyone want to answer that question in terms of what will the GPA look like at the end of the course?
I'll do that one if you guys would like, whatever you think.
I can. I mean, we don't have a camera. The ghost. I'm on my left.
Okay. All right, I'll address that with the GPA. In our Power School system, we will still be converting and calculating traditional grades. So the students will still be earning an A, B, C, D, just as they always have. That will store on a transcript, just as it always has. So we're not changing the overall letter grade that the student will be receiving. What we're changing is the way in which that letter grade has been calculated, where it is based on their knowledge and skills in the standard and not on an accumulation of points based on how they were assessed, whether it's homework, quizzes, or tests. So the students will still get a traditional transcript, a traditional GPA, and so that shouldn't affect them moving forward at all.
And from a university perspective, because it is a traditional GPA, we use a weighted GPA. Anyway, admissions will be the same as it has always been because the transcript and the 4.0 scale hasn't changed. And each school is a little bit different on how they consider scholarships. So I have another, I don't know if there's any more questions in the Q&A, but another thing that I think families maybe have questions about is if their child is struggling as we make this transition to standards-based grading, what's the best way for a family to approach maybe something that might be happening in a classroom or overall in the learning environment? If there's an issue, what would you recommend as professionals?
Just here with our secondary director, and some of our conversation has been about what is the correct procedure that you'd want to go through as a parent when you have concerns with your student's grade. And this doesn't really change with standards-based grading. The first place you would go is to your teacher, to your child's teacher, and discuss what their expectations are. If they're unclear to you, find out what those expectations are for both how to go about achieving levels of proficiency outlined by the teacher and remediation on things that they haven't been successful on already, where they might find materials to learn and relearn material. So that's mostly housed at the teacher level. Beyond that, if the answers of the teacher are, for whatever reason still unclear for you, or you want some additional guidance, you could speak with the local school administrator there, and that would be your next course of action as a parent.
I am going to share this proficiency scale for just a second so that you can see. I'm hoping you can see that. Can you guys see that? Okay. Okay. So that kind of, I know Kyle described this a little bit, but you can see over here the A, B, C, D, and then the learning target, and then the different skills that the student needs to do to reach those levels. And then they've got the teacher has a date accomplished and the teacher verification off to the right. Anything else on that, Kyle?
I said that's the main points there, Jeanette. It's just that the teachers are clearly defining what it takes to get an A, what it takes to get a C, and then the B is that attempt in between where they've mastered all of the C, but they've got they're missing one or two of the concepts for the A, and that's that should be the clarity that you should see as a parent, is exactly what it takes to get each level.
Okay, just to clarify, because I think we've had participants join us since the instructions were given at the beginning. If you have questions, there's a place where it says Q&A. Just make sure that you type inside that box your question, and then we will present that to our panelists. Maybe your panelists can think of questions that have been coming their way that they believe are critical and that you would like to address at this time. Some common questions.
One question that we're seeing in the chat is about what training is provided for educators on this regard. So Jeanette, we can address that.
Thank you. Great question. I guess going back just a little bit, each one of our pilot schools last year and a little bit before that were given 3 specific trainings on some of the big ideas of standards-based grading, the platform, the tool, those different things. And then our principals have received extensive training on that as well. We've taken several groups with us to learn and develop in this area as well. And then our committee of communication and training committee put together a schedule for this year to have each school trained by their principal and on the big ideas, those 10 critical components, as well as we have an expert with us that we've hired to help us to learn some of these ideas and work together as a team on the logistics of some of that. And we've actually had 2 meetings with him and 3 more scheduled this year. And I think individual schools are probably, at different levels in this, and principals are contacting us to work with specific teams and in some cases their entire district. And so there's a little bit of a personalized learning aspect to that as well. So anything else that you want to add to that?
We are new in implementing standards-based. We did a pilot last year. I'd be curious to hear from individuals on the panel if what we're seeing so far, what has the impact been?
This is something that's been relatively new on a district-wide level, but we've had a lot of teachers in the past that have implemented standards-based grading in their classroom. Personally, I did that for a couple of years before I took this position. So I was using standards-based grading for about 2 years in my classroom. And over those 2 years, I saw about a 15% increase in the proficiency levels in students on the state testing. I have younger students, so I didn't get a chance to see if that impacted ACT data and things like that. But as a whole, the research is looking really good and the data is looking like it's improving and it's helping students as we go through. Corey's going to bring up some more specific data and he'll share that in just a second as well. Oh, he can't. Yeah, Corey will talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Okay, so here's what I've got. I've got up our presentation, which I'm trying to figure out how I can share that with you. We're just giving me the permissions for that. But what I've got here is the growth in each subject area: math, language arts, science, and social studies throughout the district K-12 from the year 1819 to the year 1920. And this is growth by standard that we saw across the district from our initial pilot with very few teachers and very few schools in 2018-19 to our larger scale pilot that we did last year. And I do, but it doesn't work. Oh, now it's working great. Perfect. Here we go. So now you can see a little bit about how this works. So in the comparison of math, we saw a growth of 6.7% in the area of proficiency and mastery, which would be the areas of at grade level or above. We grew by 6.7% last year. In language arts, the growth was 5.7%. And in science, we saw a growth of 6.5% over the course of those 2 years. And then lastly, our largest gains were in social studies, 10.1% growth over the course of those 2 years. So those are in those areas of academic skill sets. We also have data based on our essential skills as well, but we just have those for the 1 year. So that may not be as pertinent to the question of growth. But it's nice to have this data in particular where you can see what's working, what's not, and really the benefit of intervening with students when they are not where they need to be in those 1 and 2 levels and moving them up to where they need to be grade level proficient or beyond in the 3 and 4 levels. So that's been, I think, a huge win for the district in taking this on, is to see that increase overall.
Corey, could you, maybe you mentioned it, forgive me if you have, what type of assessment or what was the growth based on? Was it end of year assessment or what?
Yeah, so the growth is based upon the teacher's assessment at the proficiency scale. So in each case, the standards have their own proficiency scale, which teachers have created as collaborative teams. And then the teachers use an assessment of their choosing. So the team will define a common assessment, and the teachers use that to determine their level of 1, 2, 3, or 4. So there's not a set district-wide benchmark for those. Those are determined at the school level and at the teacher level. And normally I'd have data, of course, on end of level stuff from the state, but of course last year we didn't have that data. So
I think overall, though, as and I mean, not really standards-based grading, but as part of the PLC process, our district has seen increased levels of growth on those end-of-level tests. Of course, we didn't have them last year, but just having teachers meet together, talk about those guiding questions, have those common assessments, look at data, and then intervene for kids. We've seen growth across the board in our end-of-level test scores as well. And of course, we don't have data for last year, but we've got data for 5 years before that. So the PLC process is a big part of that, not just standards-based grading. So.
And we'll have a presentation at this month's board meeting that will include that growth data. Mr. Burton, our assessment director, will share that with us. Okay, we still aren't getting any other questions. Those who are listening in, please feel free to put those in the Q&A so that we can deliver that to our panels.
Okay, Mari Hobson sent in a question. It says, does it concern anyone, though, that students are learning the skills, the time management, the study skills around this form of grading versus the way the university does, and they aren't prepared in a sense for what it will be like? No, that's all I can see.
So sorry, there's more to that question. He can't see it. So she says, for instance, my freshman was used to being able to take and retake and take again quizzes to get better grades, where in his success classes that are modeled after the university style, it does not allow that. And in his words, I thought I could just retake. So I'll address part of that, and then I'll let these guys pipe in. I know that the university, and Stephen, you can probably pipe in with this as well. The university has developed, as part of what they do in a lot of their courses, they have these same essential or life skills that they're working on as well. And so the state has their Utah talent map. So this is something that I think is is important in the future. I think we're learning as we go with this, but a lot of the curriculum our students can get online. They can Google it, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. And so one of the key things that we need to start doing as educators is helping them with the skills that are critical. Like, Corey addressed this earlier, those skills that are critical to work, job, play, those successful skills like time management, those types of things. I think we have to do both, right? We need to prepare them for their academic things in college, but we also need to prepare them with those study skills and different things like that. So the university is moving that way, and maybe Stephen, you can address some of those if you want to. And we could pull up the Utah Talent Map. Ours are very similar to that as well. But maybe we'll stop right there and address that on the university side, and then we'll take a minute and talk about retaking and how that's going to look as they move into the university. So I'll let Stephen talk about that.
I think that's a really great question and a great observation, and something to be aware of. I think college level classes do expect students to submit things on time, and maybe there is less flexibility. So I think it's a great point. The university has done a very similar process to the district in terms of what are the qualities that we want our graduates to have, and it's really uncanny. They didn't do this together, but the qualities are very similar: responsibility, interpersonal skills, critical thinking, and so. I think, like Jeanette said, the university is moving to similar things, but in terms of classroom expectations, yeah, I anticipate there are going to be differences, and so I think that's a good point. That is nothing new. I've worked with college students that sometimes they underestimate what it takes to be a college student, and sometimes they are well prepared, but ultimately, we want students to be competent in not only the soft skills, but in math, English, science, so that they can do the rigorous work. And then hopefully those expectations, our students are resilient enough to adapt to different expectations that a professor might have.
And that is one of the things that makes me a very strong proponent of the idea of standards-based grading, is it lets us as teachers help build those students a much more solid foundation in the skills, because a student can't move forward by doing just the homework stuff. It doesn't inflate their grade because of the practice. It doesn't allow them to do extra credit to make up a low or a deficient grade. They actually have to focus on the skills. They have to build a more solid foundation on those academic skills, rather than just the skills of knowing how to work with the teacher and kind of work their way through and improve their grade through just the practice opportunities or extra credit opportunities. But it forces them to go back to those skills that are going to be that foundation and the things that they need to move forward in the educational system.
Thank you. We've addressed these skills as guaranteed and viable curriculum, essential, priority standards. We want our students to be able to have those skills when they leave that class or that grade level. And that idea of allowing a student to reassess is the idea that we're not saying, sorry, you failed, we're moving on, you don't get to learn that skill. We don't want to do that. We want to give them every opportunity to be able to learn those essential skills that they need for the future, and even the academic and the workplace skills. But endless retakes is not what we want in standards-based grading. We want teachers to have grading policies that in order to retake an assessment, they need to show that they're relearning or additional learning, that they're taking the time to study. It shouldn't be an endless retake. I know, we have tests all over the place that we can retake, the driver's test, the ACT, I'm sure there's more, but we can do that. What we need to do is make sure that we're showing kids how to take the time to relearn, or to go over the assignments that they didn't do, get some support or tutoring before they're allowed to retake that test. So there's a balance between, we want to guarantee that these students get this and not just say, sorry, you didn't get it, we've got to move on. and but yet not, but also teach them that in order to retake, you've got to show me that you've spent some time on this and that you've studied on this. So something to think about there.
What are some lessons that we've learned? Certainly when we change the paradigm of learning like this, we're going to learn some things and ways to improve. Are there things that we've learned, lessons learned that that will enhance learning? And if another question has come in, you can answer mine later.
Let's come back to yours. I just think there was a follow-up from Mari. She just says, if they keep retaking the tests, are they simply remembering what the answers are versus the education given? And absolutely, if I give the same test over and over and over again, they're probably going to memorize the answers. I watched my daughter do an online course from the University of Utah, and that's exactly what she did. She looked at the answers, she did the test, wrote down the answers, retook it several times, so she got 100%. Did she learn it? No, probably not. And so that's always an option. And I think or she did, maybe she did, I guess that's true. But I think what we need to do as teachers is think, are there other ways to show what they know? Does it have to be the same quiz? Can they show me through a project or orally? Or there's got to be other ways that we can, after they've assessed or taken this test, maybe there's a test B, but then after that, are there some application things that they can do? Are there, can they talk to me about it? Can they show me with a couple of problems I put on the paper? There's probably a lot of different scenarios there, but yeah, if we're constantly giving the same test over and over, I don't know that we're actually guaranteeing learning.
So do I hear you saying that that hopefully a more effective process of reassessing, that would be the ideal, is to not use the same exam, but to maybe find another way to assess mastery or proficiency?
Yeah, that's definitely the ideal. We don't want to put more work on teachers. I mean, the last thing we want them to do is create 15 different tests. And so putting it back on the student, it really is the student that needs to show their learning. If they don't get it the first time, maybe they didn't do the homework or the work that goes with it. Let's have them do that before they retake it again. But then after that, maybe there needs to be put a little bit on them to show that they've got that skill in one way or another, rather than always putting that on the teacher. So, something to think about.
Okay, we had a question
like
about
another question.
Standards unique to our district or common to districts using standard-based grading. Part of that is that we've asked our teachers to define their guaranteed and viable curriculum as a team. We brought a group of teachers together at the district level to do that as well, to identify a really minimum set of standards we'd like to see district-wide, and then teams are to take from that to add their own additional guaranteed and viable curriculum. And that's now laid out both in Power School and for our elementaries. What are those guaranteed and viable curriculum standards? And those have been determined by our teachers based on, of course, the Utah core standards, our Essential 8 standards from our community. That's where those derive from. So are there variations that look very similar at other districts? Certainly, we're based off of the same Utah core standards, but were they determined by our teachers to which level and which value would be placed in those standards? Absolutely.
Stephen, I don't know if we answered your question. We'll turn it to you for a second.
Okay. I nearly forgot what I'd asked. I was curious if there have been some lessons learned as we've introduced standards-based grading. Do you foresee that this will evolve and that there will be changes and improvements as we learn more about how it's working for our families and students?
Absolutely. Not only have there been adjustments already on this path, but there will continue to be adjustments on this path. I mean, the goals of standards-based are to provide more clarity to both the learner and to the stakeholders, provide more accuracy in what we report, and provide our students with more confidence, knowing that they can ultimately achieve what's being expected of them. And really, through that clarity is one way that they gain confidence, as well as through the opportunity to reassess and to work and be resilient. Those skills that we want to develop in our students. So those are the goals, but how we get there has already changed. Of course, if you've been following this over the last couple of years, and one of the big things is bringing in educators, bringing in parents' perspective, bringing in students' perspective, which we've been trying to do, and hearing what their suggestions are and integrating those into what we do as a district. That should never be something that ends. Hopefully, that's something that continues going forward, that we continue to make adjustments that are in the best interest of students and in seeking those same goals of why we went down this path in the first place, around clarity, confidence for students, and accuracy in what we report. So,
just as a little example, we were with a group of teachers today, and they were looking at the standards that they had put into our PowerSchool system. And after the first quarter of grading, they want to make a few adjustments. And so Kyle will work with them and do everything he can to help them make adjustments. And I believe the conversation that we had with that group of teachers was absolutely in the best interest of their students and learning. They were focused on some of the same things that we talked about today, making sure they were prepared for college, but also having those skills, resilience, responsibility. And so I think changes are happening. We're working with teams all the time to do what's best for those teams and for the students that they serve.
see the question there about, do we feel like our students and our parents have walked away this quarter with more confidence? That's a tough question. I'm not sure in many cases that all of our parents and all of our students have walked away with more confidence. Particular, we as educators are learning in this process, and transitioning, and so we go into this quarter trying to provide as much clarity. The educators I know are working to their best ability to try to provide as much clarity as possible, to hold students harmless if there's been misunderstandings, to try to help them to become more confident, reassess when necessary, do all they can to remediate with students. In some cases, have our students still left with their hands up? I'm sure that's true. And have our educators left with their hands up, frustrated, trying to provide all the opportunities they can to their students? I'm sure that's true. But if we are in this together to try to build this, to provide that increased amount of clarity, asking questions, as I know this parent has, to provide more clarity and more understanding, that's the way forward here. And so there's no one, of course, wanting to do anything other than meet those goals that I laid out earlier, provide more clarity, provide more accuracy in what we report, and to provide more confidence for students. That's, of course, our parents and our educators' goals alike, to provide students with those things. And so it just takes working together, as I know this parent's done a good job of doing, and working with each other to take on that challenge, and understand that this is a process and we're not anywhere near where we need to be. And still at the same time, trying to hold students so that they're not being harmed in the process, as we learn to get to a higher plane of clarity, confidence, and accuracy.
And to continue to feed off of the idea that Corey was expressing there, anything that's new is going to decrease confidence in the initial implementation stages. As people become more comfortable with the system, more comfortable with what they see in PowerSchool, as they understand what they're seeing in PowerSchool a little bit better, as we become more familiar with these practices, confidence will increase. Right now, I do think that there's a lot of new and there's a lot of uncertainty, but I do think that over time that confidence will come back as we become more familiar with that system. But any implementation of a new idea always comes with it a decrease in confidence, just due to that unfamiliarity of the system. And the best way to overcome that is to allow time and allow familiarity and allow people to improve and to get better in their practices in that new system.
It's also good to note what has happened previously and why we've made this adjustment to allow students to have more confidence. Previously, as was suggested by Jeanette, many students, if they were to either have initial failure or at some point any given slip, students would ultimately lose confidence throw in the ball and say, I'm going home, I'm done with this. And really what we want to provide is students an opportunity to continue to relearn, to reassess, to always seek to improve, to develop a growth mindset, to become resilient as they face challenges and not simply feel defeated that there's no path forward to the grade that I want. And that's what the traditional system offered in many cases. And that's part of why we've made this move is to allow for students to and teachers to adopt policies that are going to allow for them to gain more confidence in their learning.
This has been a wonderful discussion. And if there are more questions, I don't want to end this prematurely. But I hope that those that watch this now or the recorded version, I hope they get a sense of the openness to feedback and the desire that's part of our mission is to constantly improve. And so I just would encourage parents and students and educators to keep this dialogue moving forward. And I thought the comments made about implementing new things or change, it is hard. Good change, bad change, it's still hard, but it's the way we improve. And so that would just be my thoughts as a board member and observing this process that we've gone through.
Thank you, Stephen. We did have one more question. I think it's a end unless we have a couple more coming in, and I don't have the question in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase it. They just asked about if they do have questions or concerns, who do they go to? And so I'm going to give you a list of options. The first option is we are working very hard with the suggestion of a parent to put several videos up on the website, irondistrict.org. We've got 3 videos there now, and then I'm hoping we have a couple more. We've got one that will explain PowerSchool in detail and when a parent logs in, how to look at that and how to interpret that. And then there's one that kind of goes through the first part of what we just did in our meeting, that kind of the why behind it, the journey. There's one of those. The 10 critical components are listed there. And then we're working on adding additional videos to help parents. We are open here, Corey and I and Kyle, to answer any questions that you have. Please come to us if you have those questions. And then I know that the teachers and the principals are hoping that you'll address the concerns with them as well. Ultimately, that's where they can answer those questions. If it's a specific question about an assignment or a grade, it's hard for us at the district to answer those, but it's easier for the teacher to explain or to remind them of the rubric or whatever. So hopefully we're all open to building relationships, that trust and that communication to be able to work through this process and answer those questions. So I think all of the above, we welcome parental support as well as questions, and hopefully we can work through those things specific to those students. So any other thoughts on that?
And where would you find the videos on our website? Is there a certain heading that parents would go to?
Yeah, we'll walk you through that here.
I've got the link to that in the chat for everyone, irondistrict.org/standards-based-grading. There's a way to get that through our website by going to departments and then standards-based grading, and it will take you to that same place. So if you look under departments at the top of the website and under that standards-based grading, you'll find all the information you need about the components and the videos and whatnot.
And please know that those are being updated regularly. I'm not sure if the last 2 are up yet. We'll check on that here in a little bit, but keep looking at that as well.
Okay, I think I will go ahead and close then. First of all, thank you to our panelists for all of your hard work and your service to kids as well as educators. Your comments, Kyle, were we're spot on in regards to improvement, as Stephen mentioned before. And just understanding that we have a strategic plan in place as a district, and that strategic plan can be found on our website as well. And everything that we've talked about today is an effort to make that strategic plan realized. And there were community members and parents and teachers, students involved in putting that plan together. So I think if we can always bring it back to who we are, what we value as a district in regards to student learning and educator improvement as well, then that's helpful. And knowing that our vision is to empower all to learn at high levels. And if there's something that we are not doing as a district that allows every student that we work with to achieve that, then we are always looking for ways to improve what we do so that every student can learn at high levels. So thank you all for your presentation today and bringing that all together. And a copy of this will be posted on our website so that those who maybe didn't get a question asked or weren't able to attend today can listen to the conversation. Thank you all.